Hello everyone and welcome to the second video in this vocal analysis series. So we're going to be taking a look at Ray today, and I know we just did Adonis, and normally I try not to do two members of the same unit back to back just to get some variety in the songs, but as I mentioned in the last video, the entire reason I got into Ensemble Stars in the first place was because my friend Jay is a big Ray P, and he had asked me to do Ray, so I decided I would do this one next. Also because I have a lot to say. Ray's very interesting to look at from more of a character perspective, but we'll get into that as we go through the video. I also wanted to say thank you all so much for watching and liking and commenting on the Adonis video. I really had no idea when I started this how many people would even be interested in something like this. So I'm really glad that people seem to like these. I intend to keep going with them. It just really is hard to find time to record anything these days, so for the most part, I can get everything else done fairly quickly. It's just the commentary that's holding them back from being posted more frequently. I did write a community post saying I'm trying to get these out every 2 weeks. I've already failed at that, but maybe in the future, we'll see how it goes. That being said, Adonis had 20 songs, Ray has 29, so if I keep this under an hour, I'm going to be proud of myself. I will try to keep my rambling to a minimum. It probably won't work, but anything I said in the last video still applies. I'm going to try not to repeat myself too much just to keep things shorter. And I know one of the things I said I would do this time is kind of give what I think my initial impressions would be and then at the end see if that's what happened. But considering that I'm the one that's getting all these clips together in the first place, I've already heard them, not really in succession all at once because I edit things as I have time and as I go, but it really wouldn't be genuine because I know what's going to happen essentially, so I figured it would be better just to talk about it as we go. And I've already talked far longer than I wanted to for this introduction. Let's get going. Kind of like I said for Adonis, Melody in the Dark is very much for, most of the original albums were for the characters, our first look at kind of what their singing style would be. And you already get a lot of things here that essentially continue through the entire series. I think I talked about in the last video how, compared to Adonis, who sings very rhythmically, Ray includes a lot of rubato. And rubato, again, very short, just means free time. Essentially means that you're not lining up the beats exactly as long as you still keep the same number of beats that are there. So a lot of times when you listen to Ray sing, it sounds like he's almost behind the beat, which gives it this very languid feeling that I think relates to his character a lot. And even in these clips, you can hear a lot of vibrato coming through, and Mauston has a very strong, natural vibrato that you'll hear a lot of, and he keeps it very controlled. And in the last video, I talked a little bit about how controlling vibrato works, kind of how much at any given time, and again, we'll hear examples of that as we go through. One of the things that I've also noticed, and this is kind of getting ahead of myself a little bit, but it's something that is interesting to listen for, is if you have heard Mauston sing in other series, typically he stays within the upper part of his vocal range, the upper part of his tone, whereas Ray has a much deeper voice, at least initially, and then it's played around with a lot in later songs, depending on who he's singing with, which I find very interesting. But especially if you compare it to, and again, I'm going to mention Idolish 7 because he sings a lot there, Iori, but even characters like Kiyomitsu from Touken Ranbu or Ryu from Binan when they had the character songs way back when. Speaking of Binan, did you know there's a movie coming out next year? Because I sure didn't until recently. And I have always been amused by the fact that out of the 5 main characters in that series, this was pre any Idol games, 4 of them are now in Ensemble Stars, and the 5th is Yusuke Shirai, so we're still talking Idol games in any case. Tangent, if you haven't seen Binan and you want to see an anime about magical boys that has all these voice actors, please go watch it, it's great. The point I'm trying to make is that at least at the time in 2015, most of the series that Mauston was singing for, he was not using the type of voice that he uses for Ray. And even though it's already very strong when you listen to it in this song, it develops a lot as the series goes on, and also as Ray's character develops, so I think it's interesting to keep that in mind as we go through this.
ドアの向こう 足音一つ鳴らしてそのベルを味はいかが
So I remember kind of joking in the last video that Adonis had one line in Honey Milk. Ray has significantly more solo content and a very tiny duet with Kaoru that actually brings in some harmony, which the early Undead songs, there's not a lot of duets, there's not a lot of like true harmonizing going on, so I always kind of like that little snippet just for that. Other than that, in the last video I'd also talked about how musically Honey Milk is interesting because it changes meter. And Ray's voice works really well with 3/4 time, even though they don't really get to do a whole lot of it being an undead. But because 3/4 time has a much more kind of flowy feeling to it, moving back and forth, it fits the song really well to have that style of singing that is almost too slow for the beat. So Destruction Road, there's not really a whole lot to talk about other than that you can already hear, at least in the pre-chorus parts, that he's starting to deepen his tone even more from kind of the, what we're going to call the standardized Ray tone that he uses for most of these songs. And as I said, we'll get more into that. Otherwise, very similar to what we've heard so far, but that's going to change after the next album or so. Pretty much the same tonally. You can hear a lot of the controlled vibrato in here. And Mastin technically he's a very strong vocalist in general. Being able to control vibrato like that is just one aspect of singing, but it shows that he knows his voice very well and is able to kind of shift in and out of it when he wants to, which is difficult to do because it is something you consciously have to think about while you're performing. This is the first album where they do a lot of kind of duet lines, or this one there's one with Koga. And Koga and Ray actually have very similar singing styles in that, again, they're both kind of behind the beat when they sing. They don't necessarily stay on top of the rhythm in an extremely precise way all of the time. The other thing that tends to happen is that Koga gets very, very growly when he sings, and Ray definitely can, depending on the moment, but his tone is very pure, and when I say that, what I'm talking about is, I know in the last video I talked a little bit about certain characters having a nasal tone, which means that they sing more in the upper part of their breathing system as opposed to, down in the diaphragm or through the chest area. There's also what some people would call an aspirate or a breathy tone, which the best example I can bring up with that is think of what Izumi sounds like when he sings, where you can actually hear breath coming through with the words. Ray's tone to me is very clean. There's not really much on the nasal side, there's not really much on the breathy side. He can shift it when he wants to, but his bass tone is very pure, and that means that he will sound good singing with just about anyone, because regardless of anyone else's singing style, his is neutral enough in its natural form that pretty much anyone is going to blend well with him. And again, we'll see examples of that as we go on. So obviously if you watch the Adonis video, you'll know I've spoken about why Ray and Adonis's voices go well together. This is one of those examples, because Adonis typically sings quite low. If you listen to Ray's tone in this song compared to some of the other ones, he's actually using some of the higher parts of his tone. And one thing we'll talk about a little later on is that typically his high tones, again, are very clean. He can kind of add this rasp to it when he wants to, and he does that a lot once you get into the second year Ray stuff. But when he's singing with someone like Adonis, who typically will take the lower part tone-wise, having the higher tone means that when you listen to them together, their voices are still very distinct. And that's something that, again, gets it a lot into vocal mixing, but it's certainly done on purpose. And even throughout the rest of the song, you can hear that Ray is kind of staying in that upper tone compared to some of the earlier songs where he tended to drop lower as kind of his default setting. So there's not actually a whole lot of solo parts in Valentine's Eve Nightmare, but it goes very, very low, kind of to the point that, especially in the parts where it's just kind of this rhythmic, almost talk singing, he does get a little bit breathy because the intent of it is for it to sound kind of like a whisper. So it's very hard to do any sort of whisper singing without adding a little bit of breath into it, just because that's the effect that happens when you try to whisper. He has a little bit with Kaoru here. Ray and Kaoru do sing together quite a bit. There's not much in this one to talk about vocal-wise, other than that, again, like I said in the Adonis video, Kaoru does have a more nasal tone, and usually a bit of a higher tone, so when Ray sings with him, he tends to drop lower. So Ray is one of those characters that, again, it's very easy for him to shift how he is singing to match whoever he's singing with. The Moral World, I would say, goes back into kind of his original Ray tone. There are parts of it where he goes a little lower in the verses, especially that last one, again, very controlled vibrato, almost singing behind the beat. Like, this is very quote-unquote traditional Ray singing. And one of the other things you'll hear, you kind of hear it in, he did it in Valentine's Eve Nightmare too, but at the end of this one, is sometimes when there are especially long notes at the end of phrases, his vibrato is a lot quicker. And that's something being done on purpose, shows that he has very good vocal control in general. So now we're moving into at least the Undead songs that are coming out once the music app was released. And you can hear, especially in the first one, he actually gets a little growly, and it's something he can do, but based on the fact that he doesn't do it very often, I'm inclined to believe it's not kind of a natural singing style that Masten has. He can force it when he needs to, but there are singers that obviously have more of a natural growl in their voice, which doesn't mean that it sounds bad, but the fact that it doesn't happen very frequently, I think, speaks to that it's a deliberate character choice. This one's a little more interesting because you have, again, the section with Koga, where he's pulling back a little bit. The section with Adonis, they're actually both singing quite low, but again, Adonis in particular has such a distinct tone to his voice that even if they're kind of matching tonally, they won't sound the same, so it still works when they sing together. I swear that Ray sings more in Forbidden Rain than Adonis does, and it's supposed to be his feature song. But one of Ray's character traits is supposed to be that he likes jazz music, so his voice is very well suited to that type of music. And especially in the last section, you can hear he's actually singing in what we call syncopation, and syncopation just means that it's off beat. So if the beat is doing one thing, he is intentionally singing in a different rhythm. That again makes it sound, a little bit slower than it should be. Again, the duets in here, nothing really new is happening. I was the one that planned all these, and yet so far I haven't picked one with Kaoru where you can actually hear them singing in very distinct ways. I'm sure it's coming. Like I said, he sings with Kaoru a lot, so we're gonna get more of them. And this is the point where we start to see where he's making an obvious choice to tonally shift depending on the song. A lot of the kind of more swing jazz songs, he'll stay very low. A lot of the rockier songs, he'll go up a little bit higher in the tone. It's certainly not to the level of some of the characters that I talked about previously, but there is a significant difference in what he sounds like in this song, for instance, compared to Melody in the Dark. The other interesting thing with this one is that you can hear, especially in the parts of the song where there is more of an kind of the rock instrumental backbeat happening, he's using very quick vibrato again, and then in the sections where the music kind of drops out and allows the vocalist to shine, he's bringing back a much slower version of it. So again, just very good vocal control, and I think that's kind of the biggest thing with Ray in general, is that almost everything he does is calculated, which is certainly a character trait of his, but it's interesting to see how it actually carries through to his singing as well. I talked in the Adonis video about how much I like Sustained Memories, especially as a vocal showcase. This is probably the song where Ray maintains that higher tone throughout. With the most consistency, he keeps it when singing with everyone else. You can actually hear him and Kaoru singing at the beginning, and that's kind of a good feature of their voices together, even though, again, generally Ray does sing lower when he's singing with Kaoru, but he stays up almost the entire time. Like, this is the most Iori he has sounded in any of the OnStar songs, and it's a different type of song, especially for Undead, so it makes sense that he would be using a style of singing that he doesn't typically use in the rock songs. And it works very well. Again, the vocal control is still completely there, it's just that the tone of his voice sounds a lot different than we might be used to by this point. The one interesting thing about this one is that at the end, this is kind of the closest he's gotten to belting, which he certainly can do. If you have ever heard him sing live, you will know that he can sing very loud when he wants to, and with the same level of control. So this is kind of the closest it's come to it in any of these Undead songs. I wish they'd let him do it more, but again, it doesn't really fit his character as he is now. It would fit, Second Year Ray a lot more, but we haven't really gotten to any of those songs specifically yet, so we'll see what happens when we get there. I say that and then I forgot about this song being next, where he does actually get to, essentially belt quite a bit. This one, he's staying in the upper tones again. There wasn't really any good, or at least I didn't pick any duet lines to showcase in this, but I think I wanted to focus more on his solo lines just because there's a lot of very good vocal work happening. When you get to a point of belting, and belting in music is just kind of intentionally pushing your breath out to increase the volume that you're singing at, which does require a lot of vocal control for it to sound consistent and sound good and not lose pitch. So good example of a lot of that in this one, even when he's staying more so within his higher tones. But again, very controlled vibrato, and back to that kind of very flowy style of singing that works well in things like jazz music and swing music, where there are a lot of offbeat rhythms anyway, so his voice actually does suit these styles of music fairly well.
I don't know how to give up 命なんてなせ走り出せばただの勝ちには来てるんだ最後は俺がサバイバー限界さえ超えてもまだ死ぬことなどない
Alright, here we go. Second year Ray. I think probably after listening to all these other ones, the shift is very apparent. And this is, like, Death Game Holic came out fairly early in the OnStars timeline, so even at that point he was already changing his voice quite dramatically. Like, there is a lot of rasp here, there is a lot of growl, there's a lot of, like, cutting off of notes in ways that are very abrupt compared to, you know, current Ray, who hangs on to notes a lot longer. Here everything is very, very rhythmic, which is not something that really happens generally with Ray. So I do appreciate a lot that because Ray's character was so different, they've actually brought that through very well in the singing. In terms of duets, he's got a little one with Kato. He sings more with Kato in other songs. And Kato's someone that typically when he sings, he does have a fairly clean tone, so the fact that Ray is kind of leaning more into, you know, the rasp and the growl, they'll sound good together because there's nothing competing with each other in that instance.
本当に満ちた自由を追いかける旅路お前はここにいるそのもののような爪が残した闇に轟く音色いかなる火を灯せ
So Rockroar again, even though this is still Deadman's, this was recorded a lot later than Death Game Holic. He's still using the higher parts of his tone. It's not quite as growly, but I don't think the song really calls for that. The difference in tone is still very much there if you compare this to anything that he's done as part of Undead. Something that I'll probably get more into as we get into more of these songs where he's singing with people that aren't Undead. The way that they divide his duets is very interesting because if we count Perfectly Imperfect, there are 2 songs that he's done with Kuro. Never gets to sing a duet line with him in either of those, and there are other characters where this rings true as well. And then there are characters that he seems to always be singing with.
当たり前じゃ収まりきらない任せたいそれぞれのミュージック会いたい今しかないフィーリング誰もたどり着けない絶対斜めなミュージックあるよ今しかないフィーリング宇宙で一番無邪気なスタチュー
I love Eccentric Party Night. I think a lot of people do. Very interesting to listen to this one because even though this is second year Ray, it is such a different style of singing than he sings with Deadman's. And obviously intentional. In this case, I believe it really does have to do with the people that he is singing with because especially characters like Natsume, Kanata more than anyone because Kanata's one of the characters that sings with a very strong character voice that is not necessarily like Tadori's normal voice does not sound like that. So when you have a character like that, you almost have to, if you're doing any sort of duet work, whoever's doing the other part of it almost has to pull back or else it just won't sound good together. So Ray does get to sing with all of the other members of the Eccentrics in this song, and you can hear that his voice is almost always the lower part. It's the support. Even when he's singing solo parts by himself, he's using a much deeper tone. It's fairly close to what he does for Undead, but I would say it even goes deeper at some points, and the next one will showcase that off even more. The only other thing I want to say with this song is if you can find the live performance of this that he did during the, I think it was the 4th Starry stage, it was like 2021, you have not experienced Ray fully until you have experienced Masun being Ray in a live concert. It is quite something. His vocals there are incredibly strong, so this is me saying that there are videos out there. They're not that hard to find. If you want to see it, I would highly recommend it.
裏表の長い結びつく線を結び合わせただけの日が昇ってしまうまではかりそめを楽しんでいよう愛は幻じゃない蘇るならこの瞬間を永遠にして
you can hear how low he is singing in Twilight Pentagram. It's almost getting into that like breathy whisper singing again, because there is just a point in every person's voice where you cannot sing any lower and maintain any sort of pitch, and this is almost getting to that point with him. Even more so than Eccentric Party Night, and again, I think it's just because it's much easier to support the other vocalists if his voice is in stark contrast to them. And you can hear the last part when he's singing with Natsume singing quite a bit higher, so there's harmonies going on, but it's like a very low harmony in Rei's case. He doesn't actually sing with Wataru in this, which is kind of interesting because he does sing with everybody else. I didn't talk much about his voice with Shu or Wataru on the last one, but kind of the same idea. Both Shu and Wataru have very strong quote-unquote character voices, even if it's not to the same extent that Kanata is. So again, Rei's voice being able to blend well with almost anyone serves him very well in cases like this where he's singing with other characters that have very distinct singing voices. I think I mentioned this in the last one too. Anytime you have these big group songs, there's not a whole lot to pick and choose from. Just like I mentioned with Kuro, he doesn't sing with Kuro here. He doesn't sing with Soma here, and he does actually have 2 songs with Soma. So again, there's like certain characters that just Rei doesn't get to sing with despite having multiple songs with them. This one, he's using more of that kind of higher rock tone. This is probably the best example, at least when he's singing with Kato, where you can actually hear both of their voices. They actually do sound very good together, and like I said before, any song that they're both in, pretty much they're going to sing together. There's not a whole lot to talk about with USA. He's keeping more so in the upper tones again, I think, partially because when he does any duet parts, he's doing them with Rina, who typically sings with a much deeper voice. So again, contrast is always going to sound good when you're blending vocals together. I will admit, I haven't actually seen the On Stars movie. I really need to sit down and watch it sometime. I always kind of forget that this song exists. There actually is, for the amount of people singing in this song, there actually is a lot more solo parts than I thought there would be. And he gets to sing with Nagisa, which is the only time that ever happens. It's the first time, at least in this series, it is the first time he gets to sing with Ritsu. They're not doing a whole lot with their voices in this one, especially compared to something we'll get to near the end of this video. And in terms of the solo parts in this, pretty typical, undead Rei voice that he's using for it. This is another song that I feel like a lot of people forget about just because in the game it's got, the dramatic April Fool's music video, but the song itself is actually very good. And Rei gets to sing with at least a couple of characters that he hasn't sung with so far. I think it's the only time he ever sings with Tsukasa. And Tsukasa, again, another example of a character that naturally has a very nasal tone, which we've already established sounds good when Rei is singing with those types of characters. Hoke has a very deep voice normally, and again, we've talked a bit about that too, how Rei can adjust his voice to be able to sound good with other characters that do have deep voices, and we've already talked about Rina before. Same kind of thing here. So despite Noir Neige being a shuffle unit, the only character that Rei gets any sort of duets with is Ritsu. And again, they're not doing a whole lot with it. Rei and Ritsu do not have similar voices, but they're just kind of getting them to sing the same stuff at the same time. So blending is not an issue, but there's so much more they could do, and again, we're going to talk about that a little later on. The reason before with Life is So Dramatic I said that's the only time he sang with Nagisa is because he doesn't get to sing with any of the other members of the shuffle unit, which I'm kind of sad about. In general, this is another one of those songs where he can get very dramatic with the timing and the vibrato, and he makes good use of that throughout the solo parts. There's actually not a whole lot in this one. The most notable thing is that he gets to sing with both Madara and Tsumugi, and he once again is playing the support role to both of their voices, where he kind of takes the under part, and their voices are a little bit more noticeable in the mix. This song in general is very interesting because the beat is very interesting, and again, anytime you have a song that kind of has a little bit of an offbeat rhythm, Rei's going to sound good with it, because his voice naturally has that feel to it anyway, so it just suits the style of the song very well. So this is I'll admit I haven't listened to this song too many times since it is fairly new. Again, it's something where he's singing with 4 other characters and only gets duets with 2 of them, and they're characters that he's had duets with before. Kaoru a lot of times before, and he doesn't get to sing with Soma or Midori at all. But even in the solo parts, he is showing off a lot of different vocal tones in this one. Like, there are some parts where it's quite low, then he'll go up high and kind of into that really fast vibrato. So the style of the song being, again, very dramatic in terms of the instrumental is something that allows him to show off those different parts of his voice throughout it. So this is the one I was talking about before, especially in terms of Ritsu. I'm sure some of you probably guessed this. I was asked specifically to include We Are Light in this compilation. There was no way I wasn't going to, because if you look at any of the other stuff I've done on my channel, I am the biggest advocate for Helios Rising Heroes. Please play this game. And I think a lot of people, when this song came out, had to mention the fact that essentially this is just 3 members of Undead and Ritsu, and then Faith. And unfortunately, Rei doesn't get to sing with Faith at all. I wish he did, because then I could talk about Arthur's voice. But we can all make the joke that when he's singing with Brad, he's really just singing with Adonis. Kind of true. I mean, technically speaking, if you listen to the Helios songs, which please listen to the Helios songs, they're all very good. Watcha doesn't use the exact same voice for Brad and Adonis, but when they're singing together, the same rule still apply as they did before. What I mostly want to focus on in this one, and there actually is quite a bit to talk about, this is probably the lowest that Rei consistently sings, because when they were planning this out, obviously they really wanted Rei and Brad to take the low parts, Faith and Ritsu to take the high parts, and then Koga kind of to fill in the middle. So when Rei's singing by himself, it is almost entirely low, but it's in a very sweet spot in his voice where he doesn't drop into that, so low that it's hard to keep the notes in tune, which we've talked about in a few of the previous songs. So he's not getting breathy, it's just a very nice low tone, and I really like listening to his voice in this song, and I especially like listening to his parts with Ritsu, where there is distinct harmony happening compared to Noir Neige, where they're just kind of singing the same thing. Here their voices are so distinct and so different that it really shows off what they can do. And I remember when the preview for this song came out, Daiking actually tweeted something about, I'm so happy I finally get to sing high, which to me implies that he's been waiting to do something like this. So if you haven't listened to the full version of this song, or have kind of ignored this song in general because you don't know a lot about Helios, it's great. Everything about it is great. I did not realize, I think they implied that they were going to do a song. I had no idea it would be like this. I love this song a lot. For a lot of reasons, but particularly for Rei, for the reasons I just talked about.
苦しいほど甘く許された記憶はいつかふとするたびに思い出すのはもう帰る夜のデスティニー微笑むから
Content aside, Bloody Moon Vampire is such a good song. It pretty much shows off every single aspect of his voice. He's using his low tones, he's using his high tones, he's going, a little bit kind of into that raspy upper tone that he does sometimes. He gets to hold sustained notes, he gets to use vibrato. Like, everything about this song is such a good showcase of Ray's voice. And then you find out that it's literally about having a one-night stand with a random woman. But again, like, that is obviously not part of Ray's true character, but it is part of the character that he puts out as an idol. Like, that's his appeal. And so I understand why they gave him this type of song, and vocally at least, there is literally nothing to complain about. Like, it is a very well-crafted song, again, getting into the jazzier side of things, which we know is part of Ray's character anyway. So in essence, I have nothing but good things to say about this song. The second solo, well...
乾くことにも慣れきったまま火が情熱をくれて焼き付けていくような熱い声で思えないのならその想い先に帰ればいい応援して返すのさ
So here's the thing, and I think I said this in the Adonis video too. As a 4/4 standard rock song, Fiery Scream is fine. He sounds fine. It's using the low parts of his voice that are not so low that he's losing the pitch in them. There's some nice vibrato going on. But for a song called Fiery Scream, I'm not getting either of those. And I think that's kind of my problem with a lot of these second solos in general. And again, I know some people like them better because of the character development within the lyrics, and I understand that, but in terms of a piece of music, a lot of them are just kind of boring compared to the first solos, which I find had a lot more personality. And then they do this, like, before the last chorus, they do this weird vocal effect where they're, like, compressing his voice, and Ray is pretty much the last character you should ever have to electronically alter their voice, and again, it's supposed to be to fit the style of the song and all that. I just don't think it's necessary. And this song also has a lot of, if you read the lyrics, there's a lot of suggestive lyrics in it, which, if I did not know any Japanese and you got me to listen to these songs back to back and told me that there was, a fair amount of innuendo in each of them, I would totally buy it for Bloody Moon Vampire. This one, not so much. So, I know this sounds like I'm being negative, and I don't want to be negative at the end of this video. It's a fine song. I just don't think it shows off Ray's voice in the way that it could, and I really think when I heard that the song was called Fiery Scream, I had an image in my head of what it would sound like. Didn't really live up to that, especially because I know that Masoon is capable of so much more. So if they ever do third solos, I hope we get a song that reflects Ray's true character and also shows off his voice in a way that he deserves. And that's all I have to say. And that brings us to the end. I have no idea how long this is going to end up being. My vocal recorder timer says that I'm at an hour somehow. It's not going to be that long because there's a lot of cuts and things that I have to do when I'm actually editing the audio, but I hope this was enjoyable. It was a lot of fun to talk about Ray, especially, as I said, because there is so much that he does vocally in terms of shifting his voice as Ray's character has changed, shifting his voice to fit who he's singing with. And when you have a vocalist that is as strong as Masoon, that is something that you can do with them. So I definitely think that OnStars is utilizing his voice to its full potential in that way. Again, if you enjoyed this video and my thoughts that probably ended up being way too rambly, please like, comment, all the things that the algorithm wants you to do. In terms of the next video, I know I had asked for suggestions. I'm kind of trying to compile them all and work through them, mostly in order, but also, like I said, with this exception, trying not to have the same unit twice back to back. So one of the first requests I got was to do Eiichi. If you've watched any of my old videos, you'll know that my favorite class from the old game was the original 3A class. I pretty much love everyone in that class. And Eiichi, there's a lot of interesting things to say about his voice. both from a character perspective and also just from some of the things that he gets to do in his songs. I almost have everything recorded and edited in terms of the songs. It's just going to be the commentary again, but hopefully I can find some time to do that, get it out a little bit quicker. Again, thank you all for the support on the first video. I hope you enjoyed this one too, and I will see you next time.